very interesting discussion with my boyfriend recently. We were having a bit of an argument over what kinds of conversation topics and behaviors were appropriate to engage in while at dinner with my husband and my husband's girlfriend. It's not the kind of scenario that has a clear protocol to follow. And it's not a common scene in romantic comedies or in TV sitcoms. So it was a very interesting conversation. The man I married, who I have a daughter with, was introducing me to the woman that he had been seeing for over a year and a half. That was the purpose of the dinner. And I was introducing the both of them to this man that I was falling in love with. And this was actually an event that each one of us was very much looking forward to. But these are the kinds of interesting situations I often run into because I am in an open marriage. But to be more specific, my husband and I are polyamorous, which means that we are open to engaging in multiple loving relationships without limitations, with the consent and knowledge of everyone involved. And those relationships may involve physical intimacy, but they often go much deeper than that. When I say that we are open, it means that we're open to connecting with other lovers on an intellectual level, on an emotional level. And it means that we're open to falling in love with other people. And that dinner was the first time that the four of us had spent time together as a group. So we hadn't established any specific rules for what was and what wasn't allowed. It's like, were we allowed to hold hands? Should we avoid touching completely? But what ended up happening on the night was that I cooked a delicious traditional Peruvian meal at my boyfriend's apartment, where I am right now, as a matter of fact. My husband arrived. His partner arrived. We ate dinner. We had lovely conversations. And then we finished the evening looking at the amazing view from the balcony and watching silly videos on the internet. So it was actually a really wholesome evening. And when I identify as polyamorous, for me, it's by orientation. But my husband and I started our journey into polyamory a couple of years ago. What happened was a friend of mine came to visit from Melbourne and ended up staying at our place for about a week. And this was during a time that my husband was really busy with some work-related tasks. So I was spending a lot of one-on-one time with this friend. We developed this bond that came from out of nowhere. And it was so strong that it started to make me nervous. But then that bond that we were developing became exciting. I was excited about the feeling of having butterflies in my stomach again. And I was excited to tell my husband about it. It didn't feel at all like it was going to be a threat to our relationship. I just felt this like indescribable excitement. I was a little nervous, I'm not going to lie, but mostly excited. I'm a life coach. And one of the things that's at the core of my practice is the understanding that some of the things that hold people back in life are this tendency to adhere to societal expectations that in reality are pretty arbitrary. And I get a lot of questions from people when they find out that I'm polyamorous, which is great. People are curious. I love answering questions, but I also get a lot of judgment and criticism sometimes. And that's fine too, because I've always been an outsider. I've always been an out-of-the-box thinker. So I don't really concern myself with fitting in or about other people's judgments. I've been accused of not being committed to my marriage. And the truth is that when my husband and I got married, it was because we wanted to build a life together and create something together that would leave this world, that would leave the world better than how it is, essentially. We wanted to create that. It wasn't because we wanted to take ownership of each other. And we also have an understanding that this toxic form of jealousy that comes with a lot of, not all, but a lot of monogamous relationships is not equivalent to love. Jealousy is not love. Love can be defined in so many different ways. I've been accused of being promiscuous. But the truth is that one of my partners lives on the other side of the world in New Mexico, and we still haven't even met in person. So I'm clearly not using him for sex, obviously. But my relationship with him is about this intellectual connection that we have around philosophy, around poetry, around politics, and all sorts of big world issues. And the boyfriend from the beginning of my story, he breathes new life into me. He's radiant, and he has this zest for life, which is just very, very appealing to me. And with each of my partners, I get to indulge in these different sides of my personality that I couldn't possibly do with just one other person. If I want to have discussions about ridiculous pop culture references from the 90s or some random obscure Scandinavian film, I'm not going to bore my husband with that stuff because it's not really what he's into. But I know exactly who I can go to with whatever weird insight or thought pops into my head. And one thing that does for my relationship with my husband is that it makes it much more, I like to think of it as a more distilled version of our relationship, because he has facets of his personality that he can indulge and he can really expand on in very authentic ways with other people who he has that connection with. So we don't hold each other as a captive audience. And that leads to the two of us being more fulfilled individuals. And everyone benefits in that scenario. For me, it just makes sense. I don't suggest that polyamory is the way of the future or that everyone should be polyamorous. I don't have a problem with monogamy, if that's how people choose to live. But what I urge people to consider is why they make the choices they make in terms of their relationship dynamics. Because there is such a thing as toxic monogamy, but there is also such a thing as toxic non-monogamy as well. So for us, it's super important to have very clear, open, frequent communication, to be very careful in who we select as partners, to be very, very careful about who we introduce to our daughter, who's 4 years old, and how we introduce them to her. And it's extremely careful to make sure that everyone is being treated with respect in the various dynamics that our relationships take. For me, asking one person to be my everything, that's something I can't even wrap my head around that concept, to be honest, because my husband and I are both very complex, very multifaceted people. And as happy as we make each other, we understand that our potential happiness as individuals is limitless. And when we allow space for each other to experience limitless happiness in every possible form, that makes our relationship stronger. Love isn't a currency. Love isn't about ownership. And as I said before, jealousy isn't equivalent to love. Jealousy does pop up into the equation in my polyamorous relationships, certainly. But one of the benefits of that and exploring the things that make me experience jealousy is really looking deep into where that emotion is coming from. And if it's reflecting something about myself that I feel I want to improve. In a way, jealousy in that context is a gift because it forces me to confront things that I want to change about myself, about my relationship, or in my own life. And that's an insight that I wouldn't necessarily have had if it weren't thrown into my face over and over and over again. So jealousy in the context of my polyamorous relationships has just been a tool for self-exploration. And it's been a very temporary, very brief stepping stone towards the building of each of the relationships that I have been in. And I think the thing that I've benefited most from so far through openly and actively engaging in polyamorous relationships is having no limitations on how I can connect with someone, even if it's not with the aim of starting a romantic relationship. I don't have to get nervous if I'm, feeling a bit of a spark with someone I meet at a party, because I don't freak out about the slippery slope that might lead to some sort of infidelity in my marriage, which would then, ruin something amazing that my husband and I have built. Because, we could be married for the next 50 years. And I would hate to imagine a scenario where we had been married for that long and then one of us strayed and suddenly that just invalidated all that time that we had spent building a life together. To me, that is such a shame. So I often urge people who are curious about polyamorous relationships or all the dynamics and challenges involved in it to really have an open, honest discussion about it and consider whether the monogamy of any relationship you might be in is something that's been imposed on you, or if it's something that you're choosing together. And that's my story.